Hope you can hear me. Yes. At Ingersoll Rand, we very effectively use a therapy. It's called the clapping therapy. And what it does is, I hope you all know that clapping is very good for your health. It triggers your circulation system. It motivates everyone else, and it helps you keep awake. So we'll start with the clapping therapy. Okay? We'll end as well as with the clapping therapy. However, in between, if we see that the energy levels are dying down, we may ask for that therapy to be used again, right? Welcome to my co-panelists here. Today, we'll start with talking about how do we involve everyone in the diversity conversation. And we'll practice that as well, because in the last 5 to 10 minutes, we will involve you all in the diversity conversation, right? So we start with asking our panelists on, just to give context, in your respective organizations, what are the D&I initiatives or focus areas?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So we never talk about gender diversity, or we don't talk about specifics. What VMware is always propagated and what they kind of talk about and resonates very well with the organization and the employees is 3 things. Bringing a very inclusive culture. How do you make it much more representative? And then how do you promote thought leadership, right? We don't talk about whether it is through gender, it is with people with disabilities, or whether it is LGBT that's going to do that. But it is just talking about talent, but saying that the organization has to be represented and there has to be culture that permeates in the organization to be able to kind of really bring along people with differences and being able to kind of bring them together to really be successful in terms of our business outcomes. So that's how we really talk about diversity and inclusion.
Thank you. Ravi?
Yeah, so at Schneider, our primary objective has been to really foster a culture of inclusion where all diversities are respected. So, but I guess in the past couple of years, our stress has been towards gender diversity. Primarily because we were struggling to really keep pace. We were at about 9% gender ratio in 2014. Today we are at about 21%. So I guess that's a significant progress that we have made in terms of really bringing about policies to really keep pace with what we're supposed to do, as also, and then try and create an ecosystem around the gender to really bring about parity. Including everything in terms of the policies, in terms of the pay parity that we actually put together. I guess it's about just to really provide equal opportunities across the board. So I think that's what we are focusing on.
At Intuit, what we are doing right now is it starts from the leadership. Vijay Anand, who's our leader, he drives from top. And we are very inclusive starting from a hiring perspective. We want to make sure that the kind of people who we hire come there, enjoy the environment, make sure they deliver and perform at the best. So the whole organization is very supportive and very encouraging in terms of what kind of people we need to hire. We recently started a whole new program from a diversity inclusion, where we are hiring not just for HR, but also from a tech organization perspective. So very supportive and very encouraged by the leaders. And it starts from there and kind of cascades at the bottom.
Great, thank you. And I'll share the Ingersoll Rand perspective as well. One of our enterprise strategies is a winning culture, and we drive that through having a progressive, diverse, and an inclusive culture, progressive workspace, diverse workforce, and an inclusive work environment. Okay? And as part of being an inclusive organization, as a primer, we try to drive it through our values. For example, respect is one of our values, and we try to drive inclusiveness and acceptability of diverse views through respect. So amongst there are 12 rules of respect, and I'll just quote maybe one of them, which all of us need to be aware about. It's called listen and shake the butt. Okay, so shake the butt is many times in our conversations when we listen to someone, we bring in the word but, right? So we say, yes, I agree with you, but, and everything else that follows the but is not, acceptable, or the other person doesn't want to hear it out. So how do you change that to yes, but, from yes, but to yes, and? So we'll move on now, coming to the main topic of how do you align your stakeholders, how do you get them to be part of the conversation and also drive them to action. So in your journey, in your respective journeys, can you just give us examples of your learnings or your best practices on aligning with your stakeholders and getting everyone motivated to action? So whoever wants to go.
Yes, so I guess it all begins with the intent at the organizational level and the senior leadership level. So we have our CEO, Jean-Pascal Tricoire, who is actually the champion for the E4She movement that's driven by United Nations, and actually has made a pledge to the United Nations saying that we will at least have 80% of the organization really meet the gender pay parity. We at least have 40% of people entering our workspace being a woman. So again, these are very strong points that we actually go and add and commit. In addition to that, he also has a key task force that he drives the entire initiative within the organization. And it becomes very important that most of these initiatives that we put in place is extremely voluntary, because you force it down, it kind of really tends to derail more. So we actually go and constitute teams which are very, very balanced. It is very inclusive. We have all kinds of diversity as a part of the core committee. And then we try to really bring about initiatives that really foster a lot of networking that happens, knowledge sharing, experiences sharing that happens. We bring about industry leaders to really start talking about why is it very important for you to really be a part of this ecosystem and things like that. So I'm actually the sponsor for Women in Schneider Electric, which is one of the initiatives that we are really bringing about. What we realized is that in spite of all of these different actions that we put to bear, there are always some reasons as to which does not really surface. People end up exiting, primarily women end up exiting for whatever reason, in spite of all of the efforts that we put in. So we try to really bring about a forum that is very informal in nature, which is very voluntary, wherein we have males and females participate as a part of the team, to see at least as people communicate, feel comfortable, a lot of things surface and then at least get spoken about so that we can take actions against it. So that's actually very, very critical. And it's also very important that you actually have a lot of millennials in the ecosystem. Primarily, it's because I think the way the millennials see diversity, or primarily even the gender diversity, is very different from what the early generations used to see. Before, it used to be maybe parity, it used to be fairness and all of this, those kind of things, equality and things like that. But I think for now, if you really talk to the people, the youngsters, for them it is all about innovation, collaboration. What's it in it for me? Will it help me collaborate? Those kind of things. I think we've got to really start looking at those aspects to really get a very good mix to really make some of these really a good success.
Just to add, in Vmware, we never have percentages for anything. It's something that we have very consciously, kind of decided. And I'm not saying that there's anything bad or good about it. A lot of organizations believe that, initiatives can be driven through percentages. And so there's nothing good or bad about it. But the fact is that we believe strongly that we do not want to drive anything out of percentage, but permeate initiatives through culture and transformation. We have seen automatically that gender diversity has grown, at least in the IT team that I have in India. I have seen that, automatically people realize that there are issues in terms of not having diversity within the team. We used to have the operations team in India, which is the IT team, which is a 24/7 team, which a lot of people say that women cannot work in that. We have broken that paradigm all through the last 2 years in terms of getting women who are new college graduates join the team and do a 24/7 operation support. It's phenomenal, and they have really transformed. Nobody told us in VMware India that we should create awareness for LGBT. I think, if I may say, we are one of the organizations in Bangalore that actually had a training program recently. It's not a training, it was a monologue that we conducted within the organization, which spoke about LGBT and how do you deal with these issues and bringing it out in the open and making it a discussion, right? So there's nothing like saying that, you have to do this, or this is something that is, people do have charters that they would want to drive within the organization when it comes to diversity and inclusion. There are no targets. There is nothing that really kind of is really, told in terms of saying that you have to drive this or you have to do this, but people do go ahead and do it. When we talk about, persons with disability, I'm sorry, I respect what you said, but I do not know what's the right word to talk about it, but that's what I would use. We still have people within the team who are, are blind and who are still part of the team and who do a lot of testing within the team, especially on usability testing, right? In terms of how do you really kind of go back and address some of the needs that you have for people who use our systems externally. Sheena was talking about how do you really go back and identify people who can be recruited, getting the talent to recruit with people with disabilities. So what we've started doing very consciously as an organization is that even if we don't have the need, we conduct sessions very consciously teaching people on salesforce.com or digital marketing, things that they can pick up very easily and they could possibly get employment and generate employment in that fashion. So that these are, you really start creating the cycle of starting to create the transformation within the organization and, start generating that as a wave rather than saying that this is something that you're mandated to do this year and this is something that you will address the next year. We address all these issues simultaneously and we do it through various forums and mechanisms, and it permeates within the organization as a culture.
I forgot whatever, because listening to them, such amazing story.
Any best practices or learnings?
Yeah, absolutely. Intuit, the bar was set by, I don't know if Srini is here from Cisco. He is an amazing guy. He's the one who set up the whole system for us. For Intuit, it's not just diversity or not just women or gender diversity. It's more than that. Every time when we talk about diversity, it all comes up and lands in talent acquisition, right? Can they hire? Will they be able to hire people? Will they be able to find people? So last year, Vijay threw this challenge to me and said, Dennis, can you hire someone with disability? And I said, which team it is for? He said, none of them have lifted their hand. So I said, okay, let me try. And I said, I'll hire people for my team. And we ended up hiring 3 people with visually impaired. All 3 are 100% blind. And none of us knew how to manage or whatever to do. But people like your organization who came and sensitized us, had a 1-week training. And we said, okay, let's go and hire this person. And we hired 3 people for talent acquisition, and then a person to manage the GPTW program, and one was in the HR operations team. It's been 1 year. All 3 are doing an amazing job. They are much better than some of my people in my team. The kind of support, the kind of learning, what we have learned from them, at least for me, I wouldn't have done this in any other organization. So Intuit is moving towards that. Now we are looking at how do we bring people with disability into technology? How do we bring people into user design? How do we bring people into the NOC center? Because there is a perception that people in the NOC center will not be able to work 24/7, but then now we are saying, how can we do it? In the last conversation I heard, finding talent is difficult, right, with this kind of a background. Now we're looking at, can we bring someone 50% who has the knowledge and we will train? That's what we're looking at. We have a gender diversity program called Intuit again. I don't know how many of you are aware of it. It's basically bringing people, women who have taken a break in their career. Irrespective of whatever break it is, however long it is, we are bringing them back into the organization, giving them a 6 months of internship, and then we convert them. And last Monday is when we onboarded 11 women who have taken a break. Break lasts from someone who's like 6 years, 7 years who have taken a break. We just onboarded them. It's a 6 months program. And at the end of the 6 months, we want to kind of convert them into a full-time. If people are not ready there, we also bring them through our partner vendor, who Roshna was managing prior to this. It's an amazing program, and it's not necessary that we need to follow the headquarters. And all these programs, what I mentioned now, is driven out of Bangalore, and the Mountain View office is looking at it, learning, and they are doing this program. So it doesn't have to be like you're following the headquarters and then you follow. It always can be the other way around. So that's what we are doing at Intuit.
Great. So it is said that success has many fathers and failure is an orphan. So who do you think owns the diversity agenda, and how can we make it successful by making sure that we have the right owners? Many times it turns, Dennis, I'll turn on to you first. Many times it becomes like a blame game. For example, if we want to hire women and we want to improve the ratios, it becomes like an HR challenge, and people say that the talent acquisition team is not even giving us CVs. So how do we go ahead with hiring? So in your opinion, how do we enable success, and who should own the diversity agenda?
See, for me personally, it has to be driven by the leaders. If the leaders don't have a vision to hire people or to grow the organization with diversity, it doesn't trickle down, right? Even how much of a TA does share profiles or HR says, hey, this is the policy. End of the day, people need to be supportive of the initiative, and it has to be driven by the leaders. At Intuit again, Vijay stands up there and says, hey, we need to develop this organization. I mean, there's a person by name Taylor who is a CTO of organization. He met us last year and said, in 2020, I want this organization to be 50% diversity, 50 women, 50 men. It is coming from there. So it's easy for us to kind of percolate and tell the people in the organization on ground level, it is the leadership who's driving this, and let's work towards it. And just by telling them it's not going to help. We need to set examples. We need to kind of provide the benefits of having a right set of diversity in the organization. And that's how they see it, and then the organization goes. And we have different organizations within Intuit has 40%, 50% women in this organization. And you clearly see how it is growing and how that has been balancing the organization. And people who don't have that, we always talk about that. We bring them as an example. We bring leaders into the organization and tell them, why don't you talk about what you're doing, something different. And that's how this organization has been seeing, and that's how we've been growing. Right now, we are at 28%. Our goal is to reach 31% by end of this year, and we are working towards that.
Ravi?
Yeah, so I guess I think everybody in the organization should be a part of these the initiatives. And I primarily believe that the first line managers should take extremely larger responsibility, because they are the first ones who kind of start engaging with the talent workforce. So having said that, there has to be a vision, there has to be a stated objective of what we're trying to achieve, and there has to be a very balanced approach as to how we're going to look at really addressing different diversity challenges. And primarily when we look at the gender perspective, bottom line, I think after planet, you cannot just ignore after planet, right? So you've got to really make them a part of the ecosystem. And they bring in different perspectives. I'll just give you an example. When we are really looking at specific design artifacts, primarily within an engineering space, the way your males look at design is very different than the way your females look at design. And the kind of perspectives they bring in is extremely valuable, because at the end of the day, you've got a vast consumer base, which is mixed diversity, right? So I think a lot of things has to do with how you engage your first line managers and what you really instill in them as to what is the value that the diversity population is going to bring to bear. And it's very important that you kind of really pick out role models in each of the diversity space to be able to showcase and celebrate the role models, and then start sharing the experiences and examples so that actually you start seeing value of what they can bring to the table. And there are pretty much a lot of symbolic communication mediums that you got to start engaging to start really making a point. I just was hearing the news about the Commonwealth Games. It was the first time ever that you add an equal medal possibilities for both male and females, right? And then you can see what happened with India. You had 13 gold for men and 12 women. So I think it was very good progress. And as a part of Schneider Electric, we actually sponsored the Paris Marathon. And this year, we actually made a very symbolic gesture wherein the women actually got a head start compared to men, and the men had to catch up. And I guess there was a little bit of a 15-minute finishing situation. But at the end of the day, when we actually presented the medals, we actually rewarded both men and women on the same dais. So I think we are making those symbolic gestures at the global level, as well as bringing it down to the organization. And some of these really do have a big impact.
From a VMware perspective, what I would like to add is that we put the complete responsibility on the business leaders. So it's driven by the business leaders, owned by the business leaders. What we have enabled each location or site to kind of bring together is something called a pod, where you have representation from different business groups, HR, everybody. And then that committee or that pod, as we call it, would be the one that would really kind of draw what is that we would want to do under each of the pillars that we would want to drive initiatives on, and would give something that's a little directional to the site or the entity within that country. But it is left to the business leaders in terms of how they would want to drive each of the agendas within their groups. Because at the end of the day, I think that if we have to really permeate it within the organization and create an impact in each of those areas, whether it's diversity or it's inclusion, you would have to finally ask the business leaders to drive it. Having HR or having a group drive it is not really going to create an impact or see the benefit or the outcome that we would want to achieve.
Thank you.
I mean, HRs are more enablers, right? It's the business or the person who's working under the hiring manager, the reporting manager, are the ones who would be driving this. So HR or TA, even the talent development, they all are enablers. It's only when we have a challenge they come to them. Otherwise, it's all the reporting line managers, who we call, are the ones who should be driving this.
I agree with that, because it's important. If it is a business priority, if diversity and inclusiveness is a business priority, then like you drive any other business priority, this also needs to be driven in the same manner by setting a very compelling vision at the top, setting the right tone at the top. So everyone is enthused and inspired by that vision and gets into action. So it has helped in our organization as well. So about 40 companies in the US have signed up for something called Paradigm for Parity, which is about creating this gender equity and gender balance in the workplace. So our organization has also signed up for that. So that's clearly is creating that vision for everyone in the organization. And the way we are rolling it out is also through our ERGs, because and in our ERGs we made sure that it's not just represented by women. We've invited everyone for our network. Both men and women are part of the women's network, because in some session I heard it should not become a wine and wine session, you know. So it's not about getting together and whining about things or partying about things. It's more about how do we collaborate and get to the vision that we have set up for ourselves. And someone earlier said that everyone has good intent, but we have to have the mechanisms on how to become those enablers. So for example, Paradigm for Parity says that one of the things is that women need just not mentors but sponsors who will enable them. So we've just introduced something called Sponsoring Women to Success program. So most of our leaders want to help in this and want to contribute. So we've assigned sponsors, and we have a 1.5-year program where every 6 months this woman employee will have a sponsor. so that when we have our talent reviews, or our promotion calibrations, we have someone other than the manager representing that woman employee. We'll just end with maybe one takeaway that you would like us all to take when we go out of here. Any one takeaway?
Can I? Yeah. So we're doing a gender pay equity survey, and we recently found out that the women are getting lesser than the men. And now we initiated it's a law in California now, you can't ask a candidate, what's your current compensation? The reason is because women don't negotiate hard enough compared to our men. So we have started something called, we would not, as a talent acquisition, we will never ask a candidate who's coming to the office who gets selected, we would never ask what's your compensation. We're going to pay whatever the range is and whatever the internal parity or market ranges is. So it was pretty an eye-opener for me when I heard that women are getting less because they are equally contributing to whatever the men are doing, right? They are equally, in fact, in some cases, they are doing much more than men. So why is this parity or disparity in this thing? So for me, one of the takeaways from the whole thing is you all need to negotiate harder because you are contributing to the same economy or the same work what a man is doing. So that's what we've been talking in the organization as well as whenever we meet candidate. Be bold and do what is right.
Yeah, I think I'll second what Dennis just said. As Schneider Electric, we are actually making a commitment by end of 2018. We will have 80% of our employees at gender parity in terms of pay. So I think that's a pretty bold statement for us to make. I guess another thing that I just want to maybe leave a message is, I guess we are at the best of the time. I think you have a lot of heads of state getting involved in these discussions. You've got company CEOs getting involved. You've got universities getting involved. So you've got a good ecosystem that is churning. I think it's about you to just grab that opportunity and just go ahead and break the glass ceiling.
For me, it's very simple. Don't keep talking about it. Go and do it, right? And I think that that's what we do within the organization because we keep saying that we have discussed enough, we have debated enough. There could be policies, there could be targets, and there could be things that you are asked to do as an organization, but just go ahead and start doing it. Once you start doing it, it will automatically start flowing into the different parts of the organization, and you will mature as an organization in terms of how you drive both the diversity as well as the inclusion agenda.
Sure, thank you. For us, do we have the slide up or? Okay, I found something very beautiful that I want to put up in the slide. But meanwhile, as the slide is, we have it up. Okay, so this is something very beautifully said about inclusiveness. We are all different and we have significant unrealized potential for dialogue and debate about difference and differences. Honest discussions about diversity and inclusion aren't easy. Diversity conversations need to focus on exploration, I think that's the key word, discovery and learning, and not blame or judgment. They need to be cooperative, exploration rather than conquering conversation. Perspectives are personal and local, and everyone holds a piece of truth. There is no right or wrong here. Everyone holds a piece of truth. Well, the clapping therapy has started again. Thank you. Before we wind up, in the spirit of, even based on the topic that we have, instead of starting with a question, I'd like to open it out to the audience to talk about if something that you are doing very different from what all of us spoke about, something very different, but you're really urging to talk about it on this topic of how do we create this inclusiveness and include people in the conversation. Sure, great.
Hi, I'm Anna from Shell. So when we started off, and we all understand there's a sort of unending need for awareness around D&I. So we started off our journey by, and we have very good modules designed within Shell. So we started off booking meeting rooms, learning labs, conducting sessions. And when the session starts, we realize, yeah, people may turn up, may not turn up. And it's something which people need to feel a need to come there and attend the session, right? So we've thought of doing things a little differently. And we are also conscious that we are in a generation where the concept of dialogue or conversation probably has changed quite a bit. I mean, I grew up in a phase where if you go to a coffee shop, you order the coffee, sit and talk. And if I see a lot of folks now, they order the coffee and all the folks will be on their phones, yeah? That's how they have their dialogue. So we started having a sort of analysis as to when is a peak coffee time in office. And we went to the coffee zones and started doing short sessions. It was called Dunkin' DNI, where we took them through a lot of topics around DNI. And we probably gave them some donuts along with it, yeah. So it worked well, and I'm sure all of us here probably have a lot of practices to be inclusive around the different types in which we converse, the different types of dialogues that we have. We'll be really happy and eager to hear that from all of you.
Great, thank you. One more?
Hi, I'm Madhurima, and I run the NetApp Accelerator program. And what I want to share is that, at NetApp, not just within the organization. So in our accelerator program, we have startups that we identify and then nurture them to become successful. And in our second cohort, we took a challenge that, we will get women entrepreneurs in our cohort and not just, have the males which dominate this space primarily. And we ended up having with 3 female entrepreneurs out of a cohort of 6, which makes it a 50% ratio. And what I want to point out is that it's not that we compromised on anything. They were all equally fantastic startups that they were running, leaders in their own space. So the commitment came from within. We thought, the thought was that let's try to identify female leaders and have them as part of the cohort. And today we ended up. So it's just a question of looking out and making that extra effort, and we succeed. Just wanted to share that. Thanks.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. In the interest of time, we'll take question and answers at the lunch break. Okay, thank you everyone, and thank you to my co-panelists as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.